I
Okay, so we have to stop the class a little bit early. I have to take my daughter to the doctor again, but let's see how far we could go, at least 45, 50 minutes. So let's bring up the text. We're holding in chapter 94 still, which is the laws of the Eiruv Chatzeiros. So we've discussed different important discussions about the Eiruv Chatzeiros of this communal Eruv, kind of bound together with the typical Eruv. As we're going to see, we discussed how do we do it today because we don't find people making Eruv Chatzeros. You definitely need an Eruv Chatzeros if there's no Eruv in the city. Why, when there's an Eruv in the public city? We're going to address it actually in the halachot today, although we discussed it many times of how does it work today. Because again, the rule of the Eruv Chatzeros is of the Eruv of the courtyards is that although the courtyard is a private domain, it's all locked up. So it's not a public domain. So in theory, you should be able to carry there without any issues. But Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, instituted that there should be a Erev in the Chatzer itself, in the courtyard itself, and then to combine different courtyards and to combine courtyards with valley alleys, so that people should not forget the laws of carrying on Shabbos and the Shpir and awareness of the laws, even though there is a public domain, and therefore you sort of say can't take from your private house out to the courtyard. It's surely not from a courtyard to the next courtyard, even if there's a connecting door. So we have all these. There's the Eiruv Chatzeiros that we discussed. That there has to be, what happens if the owner or the lease owner is a Gentile, and how you have to rent space from people that live in the courtyard who are not participating in it. Meaning, if a person is non-Jewish, so that person lives in the courtyard and has equal rights as a member of the courtyard to have access to the to the courtyard itself, and to use it for whatever everyone else could use it for. So does that person disrupt? He can't join the Erev Chatzeres because he's not obligated to keep Shabbos, and he can't disrupt. But he disrupts it because he's not part of the communal space. So we learned that you have to rent the space from the Gentile. And the Gentile now, so to say, leases out his space, and then kind of, though he still lives there and still has access to it, but you have the legal right, so to say, of his space there, and therefore, or her space there, and therefore it doesn't disrupt the unity, so to say, of the courtyard of the Erev Chatzeros, where everyone has to participate. The idea of the Erev Chatzeros is that everyone, by giving food towards the Erev Chatzeros, and we said you have the tumatzas and the foods, when by giving food towards the Erev Chatzeros, that makes it a communal kind of single place where everyone's going to join and eat together, even though it's technical, and you're not going to end up eating that food at all, and it stays from year to year. But the fact that you can and you've contributed, so it creates this community space of not just a whole bunch of individuals living in a courtyard that have equal rights and access to the courtyard, but it actually creates a unity between the people that live there. And that it will bring awareness that we're carrying because of our unity, and therefore, if we do go outside of the Erev Chatzeros and there's no Erev, we have to be careful not to carry. Okay. But the question is, how do you technically rent this space from the Gentile? So it says, Keitzat Tzeichrim, how do you rent it? So Oimrim Lo Yisrael, so the Jew will tell the Gentile in the courtyard. Again, the courtyard is not just the ancient courtyard, like the illustration that ChatGPT made us of a courtyard that's like the courtyard down the road from me, but Iran, where there's a whole bunch of houses that are in a single courtyard. But an apartment building isn't, for practical purposes, a courtyard as well. And as we learned, it's the same thing applies even in a house that has rooms that are rented. There has to be this community setting. So Keitzat Tzarchen, how do you do it? Oyun Yisrael, so the Jew tells the Gentile, Haskeli Rishuscha b'moyzelu. Rent me out. I would like to rent your property in this joint courtyard for such and such amount of money. You don't have to tell the person, the Gentile, I'm doing this so I should be able to carry. He doesn't have to know the why. He just has to know the what. But if on the reverse, you don't rent it from them, but you just ask them, please give me over your sort of say your right, your right to the courtyard. So I should just be able to carry on Shabbos. That's not going to work. You have to actually rent it. So let's see the footnotes. The footnote says like this. Asking him to give it as a present, as a gift, would also make it invalid. It means not just saying to, but give me but just to ask me to give it as a gift. It's not good enough. However, rental, even for the smallest sum of money, is valid. It doesn't make a difference. It means to get the symbolic of renting has to happen. The kinyan, the transaction has to happen. That I now have the ownership, so to say, of this right of carrying that you have. Not that you can't use it, but I'm renting it from you now, so I have it. Now it's basically you making the Gentile your tenant. Now it doesn't have to be for a lot of money. It doesn't have to be for the amount of rent that you would cost to rent an apartment. It's rentals even for a small sum of money is valid. Even for less than a pruta. Even less than a pruta. We'll see what a pruta is in a second. Because it came up yesterday in the Gemara class as well, which is a halachic minimum required for financial transactions. Even that's not required. You may rent it from him even on Shabbos, even though you're not allowed to make a transaction on Shabbos, for it's not considered an actual renting, it's just symbolic. Okay, so he can't gift it to you, you have to rent it, but it doesn't even have to be a amount. It's just, again, with Shlomo Melech, again, we have to remember what we're doing over here. Shlomo Melech wanted to kind of make this awareness that the reason why we're carrying in the courtyard is not that we should forget the laws of Shabbos, because the concern is that if a person lives in a certain space, and that's what's really happening today, because we're making the cities into big courtyards by putting Eiruv in Seattle and in Brooklyn and in Borough Park and Manhattan, so people forget the whole laws of Shabbos that you're not supposed to carry because they've never been in a place where they're not allowed to carry for Shabbos. And Shlomo Melech was concerned with this, so he wanted to bring an awareness. Now, of course, one could argue and say, well, how many people know that there's an Eiruv Chatzeiros? People know less about the laws of Eiruv Chatzeiros than they know about the laws of Eiruv, because the Eiruv affects you directly. Do I carry? Don't I carry? But if you ask a person how many people know the laws and the way you set up an Eiruv Chatzeiros, less people are aware of it, and that's unfortunate. But still, when by us studying it and learning it, it's obviously bring awareness to us. Just a quick question, because it came up in yesterday's class, how much is the value of a pruta? So how do you calculate a pruta, let's say nowadays? So pruta is based on, he says it has to be about 0.025 grams of silver. I checked today, and that's pretty much what it says over here, as of the value today. I think this was for January 2026. It's about 6 cents, depending on the price of silver. It's not a lot. So we're talking about, oh yeah, he says January 26, so it was 2.89 for a gram of silver. So, and a pruta is 0.025 grams. So the price would be about 7 cents. And you don't even have to pay the 7 cents for the space of the Gentiles' property to rent it. So we're not talking about obviously significant money. Yes, Rebecca.
But a penny is copper, it's not silver, so how do you
It's the
like
value. It's the value. So the value of silver,
oh okay.
it's a 0.025 value of silver today, and how much that would be in today US dollars or in shekel or what have you. Okay. So you have to rent it. Now, again, it's kind of symbolic. So therefore you're allowed to do it on Shabbos, means to make the transaction on Shabbos, obviously pay it after Shabbos. You could rent it from even the wife of the homeowner, even from a service person, because again, it's not like the person is signing off actual ownership of the house. It's kind of giving the Shabbos rights to the house, and therefore even a wife or any other family member, as the Tosfos says in Masechtas Eruvin. Okay, Sachar as a Reshus Stam. If you rented the premises without specifying any definitive period of time, you didn't say how long you're renting it for. Mahani lechozman shaloi chazer bo ha'eni Yehudi v'hu darsha. It will be valid. It says over here, as long as the non-Jew does not change his mind. He doesn't go back and say, I don't want to do whatever you're doing. By the way, you think about it, okay, what's the big deal? It's not so simple. If you were to knock on, Rebecca were to knock on, you live in an apartment building in Manhattan. If you personally would knock on someone's door in Manhattan and say, I'll give you 7 cents for your rights, for your apartment, and, because this helps him, even if you did explain it, it helps him my Shabbos. It's not going to be so simple. Most people, unless you're very close with them, will ask you to please leave their house. So it's not something that's so simple, so people could change their mind. Therefore, what we do today is like we're going to learn soon, is done via the municipality, the mayor's office, etc. But the where you could sit down and have a meeting and explain the technicalities of Shabbos. But it's not something that's so simple. Therefore, you could be in a scenario where the Gentile comes over to you and says, whatever you're doing, I don't want to do it anymore. So that could disrupt this whole. Okay, but again, you can't. There's no way around it. If a Gentile lives in your chutzner, again, your chutzner means your apartment building, your house has a rented apartment in your courtyard, whatever, and doesn't want to rent out your space, it disrupts. It doesn't allow for you to carry. We'll see what happens if they say no. But it disrupts the Eiruv Chatzeiros. So as long as if you just give it for an unlimited amount of time, without limiting the time and without and the person doesn't go back on their agreement, so it stays effective. Yahtzim B'Shamen Yehudi. Zev v'nichnas acher b'mkayim. Let's say someone changes the lease, and the Gentile leaves, and someone else comes in. So even though you leased it from the first person without a specific time, it only lasts as long as that person's there. Then you have to rent it from the second person again. But if you did it for a specific period of time, so if you say, and this mistrabli is, I was just thinking as we were learning, because I prepared this yesterday, but I didn't think about it. Because even if you do the mayor's office, there's people buying and renting apartments and houses in a city all the time. People are moving in from out of state, out of the city, and leaving from the city. I mean, a place like Manhattan, it's shall be happening of thousands of people a day. So even if you were in the mayor's office last week, if there's an exchange of people, you have to do it again this week. So here it says what happens. So if you do it for unspecific period of time, so then and that person stays in your apartment or your courtyard, so then it lasts as long as that person's there, and unless he says I don't want to, she says I don't want to do it anymore. If you do it for a specific period of time, so you have a plus and a minus. The minus is it only lasts as long as that time. The plus is he says. And that person rents it out to another person. The first renting applies even though it changes leases. Why? Because you gave a specific period of time. So this period of time takes precedent over the specific person that lives there. So this is kind of an advantage where how to actually specifically be specific about the time. Let's say you say we're going to do the Eiruv Chatzeiros every year and before Pesach. So therefore, no matter even though the people in the apartment building or in the city for that matter are moving in and moving out, it's okay because it's all within the initial lease. But that only helps for renting. What happens if the person dies, the Gentile? And then it literally changes ownership, not just leases. Or the person sells it to someone else. So then you have to rent it from the person who inherits from his father or mother, or from the new buyer. This creates a difficulty because in houses in a big Erev, like a city, people are not just renting houses, they're buying houses all the time. How about if you rented from a service person? If you rented it just without a limited time, it only helps as long as the service person is there, because he's now the representative of this transaction. But if the service person leaves, if you rented it for a time, then the service person, even if the service person leaves, then it remains in place as long as that time is there. I think we're going to get, actually the Kitzur is going to talk how they do it in big cities. And the Kitzur kind of is going to put together the Eiruv Chatzeiros, the Eiruvim, although they're very separate. Again, because the Eiruv the general idea of Eiruv is to create a private domain. That's number one. The idea of Eiruv Chatzeiros is that even in a private domain, you need to have on top of that an Eiruv Chatzeiros to permit carrying it. Today, we make it all one. We make an Eiruv in a city or an area, and with it, we make an Eiruv Chatzeiros on that area. But in theory, they're two separate things. It's not one thing. Now, how we go about doing big places like cities or neighborhoods most probably would fall under the character of the Mishares, of the service person. Like the mayor would be the mayor's office would be the service person in theory on behalf of everyone, and therefore the service person, because the relationship between the city and the house owner is just technical. It doesn't make a difference who buys it and who sells it. The level of ownership that the city has on someone's private property is always there, and therefore the technical kind of change would be like someone giving out their lease, even though we're doing a sale. That's probably how they avoid having to do a new Eruv every week, because not just every week, there's people moving in and out on Saturday also. It's a big moving day. It could be sales day, right? So let's see what happens. Let's see the footnotes. See what started off maybe as something smaller became more complex. It means if you have a courtyard and it's closed up, like the illustration we had in our picture over here, that we have a courtyard and it has in it, if it's, let's see if it's still here. If we have a courtyard and it's closed, it's an enclosed space and it's a Rishus HaYachid, so everything's good. And then we're going from there to we want to be cautious of, yeah, here we go. So we want to be cautious of Shlomo Melech. So here the courtyard's there, the wall is there, and you have 5, 6 houses, and you just want to unite these homeowners that live in the courtyard. So that's kind of simple. So the actual Eruv to make it a private domain exists. It's a private domain. There's doors, there's walls. People can't just walk in, and therefore, and then you have the owners, and they make a union. So everything's good. Let's say one of these owners here is a Gentile. You make a deal with them, it's fine. But as you kind of expand the Eruv to larger than these courtyards, to cities or big neighborhoods, especially in complicated cities, then it becomes much more complex, much more complicated than just a simple Eiruv Chatzeiros. And first of all, it has to be obviously there has to be the first Eiruv, and on top of that has to be the second Eiruv, this Eiruv Chatzeiros. So that gets much more complicated. Okay, we're gonna deal with this complication. Where are we holding? The footnotes over here. 51. If you specified a time to the non-Jew, you specified a time to the non-Jew. Sorry, if you specified a time, the non-Jew may not change his mind even if he returns the money. Okay, so the Shvus Yaakov says there's another benefit than the Mishnah Brura. Hey, Aaron, there's another benefit of the renting for a period of time. So obviously a period of time should be a year at least, because then the person can't back out of it. So then you don't have that concern. Also see Taz and Shar Hatzion. Okay. 52. But if you did not specify a time, you must rent it again for from the new tenant, says the Pri Megadim. Okay, that's obviously that. So basically, if you have no specific time and the person stays and doesn't back out, so it goes as long as the Gentile lives in the courtyard. If you give a specific time, it expires after that time. The benefit of using a specific time is, according to the Pri Megadim Mishnah Berurah, is that the Gentile can't back out. So again, it's not like the Gentile can't go to his house, can't use his house, but can't back out of this transaction that's kind of Torah transaction, meaning to say that it doesn't really affect the Gentile's life. He would just be doing, I'm uncomfortable with this for whatever reason, and then he can't back out. But so that's the benefit of time. The next thing in benefit of time we spoke about is if it changes lease owners, that it also you don't have to redo the Eiruv Chatzeiros. But if you don't specify the time, then if a new person comes in, you have to do it again. Hold on, Aaron. 53. It's very likely you missed your question has to do something with the fact that you're coming in middle class. So just wait a second. So here, 53 is just a source. 54 is also a source. Yes, Aaron.
What if he had to back out because he got sick?
It's not again. You came in with the class. This is a technical transaction. It's not the Gentile is just making a transaction for less than 7 cents.
Oh, okay.
It's not a major transaction. Okay.
Thank you.
But if he passes away, you have to do it again. Now we learned that if he passes away, or if he sells it, So the initial sale doesn't help. So again, the best case scenario for Eiruv Chatzeiros would be to give a specific time that covers any change of lease, doesn't really let the Gentile back out. It means of the thing that he's doesn't really affect his life. It's just that he's participating in something Jewish, and kind of protects the Eiruv Chatzeiros. So that would be the best thing. The only downside of it is obvious that it expires after a certain period of time, but therefore you could do a long period of time. But that doesn't help if there's a death and there's a total change of ownership, or a sale, which is also a total change of ownership. You have to redo it with the new tenant, with the new owner. Okay. You can't just, if you have to redo the renting from the Gentile who's in your courtyard, whether that's the courtyard like the illustration, or the courtyard of the apartment building or the city, it's not enough to redo the lease. You have to make the whole Eruv again. Means you have to take the whole food again and get rid of a whole new food and all that. The Ein Eruv Chayzev Veneer, you can't reawaken an Eruv that was disqualified to be requalified. It's not like you could say that the Eruv kind of, it's like a light that goes on and off, that when there's a new owner, now the Eruv is not active anymore because you have to first make the transaction. And now that you made the transaction, it gets reactivated. No, once it's canceled, it has to be done again new. Okay, that's an important piece of, again, these things are very simple in a small courtyard like the illustration, where it's not so complicated. It becomes complicated in big buildings, in big places, in places where people are not, necessarily have social interactions with people in your courtyard, in your apartment building. We're not always not everyone is like, part of the party planning committee or what have you. And some people have a private life and they don't have much to do with the people there. So it's much more complicated. Like Rebecca would know, you have some apartment buildings in Manhattan that can have hundreds of people. Okay. What happens if, for whatever reason, you can't, like Aaron was basically asking, the person doesn't want to be participate in the schiras. The person initially doesn't want to. We talked about the person wants to cancel it. But what about the person doesn't want to go into a transaction at all? You say it's okay. It's not. Don't worry. You still own your house. I'm not going to come take your house. You say I just need to have this transaction for the Eiruv Chatzeiros. It's going to cost 7 cents, 6 cents, whatever it is. The person says, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't want to be involved. If he can't, the person doesn't agree to rent it out. It's still complicated. It's not so simple. What happens is then another Jew, and it doesn't have to be a Jew that lives there, but someone who's Jewish, because the Jewish person has to be able to be part of the Eiruv Chatzeiros, has to ask for permission to place something in the guy's house. The person says, I'll leave my umbrella in your house. And by placing something in the person's house, kind of gives an entry to the house. It was a koina Yisrael Samakim, that person has that kind of space, because if a person says, can I leave my umbrella in your house, even though your umbrella takes a very small space, but if the person says, okay, that means now my umbrella is taking up a tiny space in that house, and it's in your house, and therefore that little space, that the person lets you leave the item there, will be enough to unite the whole house and make him, the Jew gives that part, and that represents the house, and therefore unites the chutzner. What we're seeing over here is if someone would learn the law, hold on, Aaron. If someone's going to learn the law, this seems all tricky and kind of pointless, and if the person doesn't really know what's going on, but again, you have to remember the foundation of this law. The foundation of this law is awareness, and there's like a lot of effort that goes into creating this awareness and this unity. Although it is technical, and although it is, at the end of the day, it has to be valid. It's not just symbolic. But there is some sort of level of symbolism in it that allows for this kind of maneuver. Yes, sir.
Okay. So there's a new kind of rental where, okay, just giving you an example, you have a house, you only have one car, so you rent either you rent a garage, or you could just rent for another car, or you can rent a space for any, like as I say in the commercial, you could rent it so people could just use it as storage. So now you rent it legally, and is it his house is his house and only the part that he gave you for storage is yours, so he still has to be involved? Or because I'm the Jew and I rented part of that spot, I can do the transaction instead of you?
No, see that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying, let's say you have let's just call it for the sake that you have the Eiruv Chatzeiros committee, right? So let's say you have an apartment building, you have the Eiruv Chatzeiros committee. So the Eiruv Chatzeiros committee is in charge of renting from all the Gentiles in the building or the Chatzer to, the symbolic, and say, okay, so you have one person who doesn't want to join. One Gentile doesn't want to allow it, whatever it is, doesn't want. So you're right. So yes, one private person has whatever kind of transaction, even if it's not as technical as you said, where he's actually renting the space, but just says, "Can I put my umbrella in your house?" That's enough for the Jew to have some sort of connection to the house, and then on behalf that Jew, he joins the Eiruvei, and that represents the house. Now you're talking about parking. That's the problem. The parking is that the parking only for the parking lot. It's not you need to actually get access to the actual
No,
house.
they in Brooklyn, they rent garages. So the house is the house, the garage is the garage. But say the lady turned 75, 80 years old, now she can't drive anymore. So she'll rent the garage for like half the price of the garage under your apartment. And so you'll take her garage.
I hear what you're saying, but
And it's or her driveway. And it's a one of those kind of houses where there's 4, 5, 6, 7 houses all in a row connected.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure if having right to park a car in the garage or in the driveway gives me access to the house.
And what about the other one where they actually rent space? Doesn't matter where. Say it's in their basement. It could be in the
Okay,
garage to
so
put stuff.
space in a basement, I think, would be enough. Space in a basement would be enough. But I'm not sure if a garage, if you have, let's say, like a not a Brooklyn garage, but a regular garage, or the garage is part of the house.
Brooklyn
Um,
garages, well, they'll rent the rent. Some of the garages are part of the house.
so
Literally,
that has to be figured out. If a garage is part of the house, is a part of the house.
as my
Um,
friend, I mean, he didn't have to do this because everyone knows the Jews and helps out. But he actually rented a garage that was attached, and he put his car in for half the price. Would he have the right to make the thing for them?
represent on the house. It could be. It depends. It depends about it. The garage is a question. The garage, a driveway, I don't think so, but garage maybe. Okay. But also not a garage like you have. My grandfather, Al Shalom, had a garage in Brooklyn that was nothing. It was in the alleyway, no connection to the house.
A
All
lot of
right.
people have that.
Yeah, so I feel so he says like this. So B'zeh Kohen Yisrael Samakim, then the Jewish person has access to the place on behalf of the committee of the Erev and could join in there. But I feel Lakas Achayvitz Misham Kohen Shabbos. He doesn't have to keep it there the whole Shabbos. It's not like you have to put the leave the car or the umbrella the whole Shabbos. Even if you take it away before Shabbos. But he had permission to leave it for Shabbos. So then that's enough of a kind of a connection to the house to rent out the space on behalf of the Gentile, and therefore he joins the Eiruv Chatzeiros. And therefore he joins the Chatzer. And therefore he represents now the house. Again, it's not trickery. It's again, if we remember the reason for the Eiruv Chatzeiros, and it's not like you're taking something from you're kind of creating a union. And if the Gentile doesn't want to make a union, you're kind of getting some sort of halachic grip on the person's property enough that just joins the Erev, so we could all carry. It doesn't really affect any kind of secular legal ownership of the house, and doesn't affect the person's activities and movements in the house. All right, 56. If it's impossible to rent the premises because the non-Jew refuses to rent it, so then he says, even a Jew who does not live in the court, the Levush, and the Mishnah Berurah says, could still make this agreement to have, like Aaron says, rent space in someone's basement, or just leave an umbrella, etc. See Bir Halacha for important details. Okay. Obviously, there's more details than we have just by the general idea that I'm going to take the space. The beer halacha gives a lot more details that are important for us before we act on this. Okay, let's go. Hold on, Aaron.
Louis, one question. Do they need to have a key even if they never enter it?
No, I don't think you have to have a key. No. I don't think you have to have a key. The
So
key
you
is
would have to knock on the door to get in.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you have to have a key. I think because even if you take the umbrella out before Shabbos, I don't think you need to have a key. I think you just need to have to be able to get in if you need to knock on the door. I think the key or the access is only we spoke about where the actual Eiruv Chatzeiros is kept in the apartment. That if the person locks it up and leaves for Shabbos, then no one could eat the food. But that's about because the idea of the Eiruv Chatzeiros really is kind of creating this joint meal that never really happens. Okay. So 59 says, okay, obviously. So these obviously this is not we're learning very basic laws of the Kitzur, which is not enough information for any of us to take enough action to actually act on it. But as he says in footnote 58, more details is required. If what are we talking about now? Even if you remove the article before Shabbos, if you did something to acquire the use of the space, it is valid even if you did not use it at all. The Magen Avraham says just some sort of agreement to use the space is enough. You don't even have to give the umbrella. Theoretically, I'm going to leave the umbrella. Again, this is just to give us a little bit of a grip. Okay. Now we get to the more complicated laws. What about non-Shomer Shabbos people? So we spoke about Gentiles. The Gentiles are not joining the Eiruv Chatzeiros. They live in the Chutzers, they live in the courtyard, in the apartment building, what have you, in the place. Again, the Eiruv Chatzeiros is on top of the Eiruv. So you don't have to ask, in city Seattle, for instance, where the Eiruv is actually made in the north end in Seattle, you work it out, of course, with the city. And we're using a little bit of wiring. Mostly we're using telephone wires and lechis that are put onto the telephone poles. Each city has their way. It's a way of making an Erev, again, very complicated. But you'll have sometimes scenarios where you need to run a rope and a pole possibly through someone's property. And the person may not let. And we've had situations where people try to later add themselves into the Erev, but required some sort of wiring and agreement, obviously, from the Gentile property, and they didn't give it, and therefore they weren't able to be part of the Erev. But that's to make a private domain. Here we're using an Eiruv Chatzeiros to permit us to carry in a pre-made private domain. So we're not talking about making the Erev. We're talking about making the Eiruv Chatzeiros, which is on top of the Erev. So here he says like this: the Gentile has to join it because the Eiruv Chatzeiros is not just to make a private domain, but to make a union between the people in the private domain. So there has to be like they're all eating a meal together. And if the Gentile says, I'm not part of your union, that's a disruption. And therefore you have to rent his space or have access to his space to be able to rent his space out, or some sort of deal that's putting the Gentile's property into the Eiruv Chatzeiros, and therefore it doesn't disrupt. Because if there's one person that lives in the Chutzner that's not part of the union, it disrupts the whole union. Because it has to be everyone's eating together. Even if you don't eat, but at least the ability to eat together. And that's why there's the meal, the actual food, the matzah, etc. Now, so what about a non-Shabbos observant Jew? Does that person disrupt the Eiruv Chatzeiros? So it says like this: an apostate or a person who's publicly desecrates the Shabbos. So Yisrael Mumar, or someone who's Mechalel Shabbos B'Ferhesia. What is Shabbos Mechalel B'Ferhesia? We'll see in a second. That you desecrate the Shabbos publicly, meaning you're showing an absolute disregard for Shabbos. You're not supposed to do something on Shabbos, you don't care. So, and even if we're not talking about biblical observance of Shabbos, even if it's the rabbinic observance of Shabbos, so that person can't join. How do we join that person? How does that person be part of the union? He can't join the Erev. He has to rent out his space. So here it gets more kind of sticky. We have to ask the Jew to rent his space. He can't join the union. Because just like the Gentile can't join the union to be as a member because he doesn't have an obligation to keep Shabbos. And the whole point is to remember to keep Shabbos. A person who's an apostate, or a person who's Mechal Shabbos B'Ferhesia, publicly desecrates the Shabbos, cannot join the union. He can't say, I want to be part of the union, because you don't keep Shabbos. So how could you join to try to create a Shabbos space? You're not part of Shabbos. All right. So now in the footnotes, he's going to go into what does it mean. I'm trying to say there's a street in Yerushalayim that unfortunately it has cafes open on Shabbos. And the next to it, there's another cafe that has a big sign and says, here we're Shomer Shabbos b'fer Hesya. So it means we keep Shabbos publicly. We're not ashamed to keep Shabbos. So there's Machal Shabbos b'fer Hesya, there's Shomer Shabbos b'fer Hesya. Okay, so the question is like this: who are we talking about? Let's put the brakes on this non-observant Shabbos Jew, because apostate is not something that's common. But unfortunately, there are people that are not Shomer Shabbos, and they'll do it publicly. They're not hiding Shabbos. We're not talking about a person who's hiding their observance of Shabbos, their non-observance of Shabbos. So 61 says this applies only when he knows that it's forbidden. Okay, so we took care of 99.9% of the people. Most people don't know the laws of Shabbos. If a person doesn't keep Shabbos, even if it's publicly, even if you tell them it's Shabbos, they don't really understand. This is Tinik Shnishma. So you have to be a person that knows what Shabbos is, and knows what you shouldn't be doing, and knows, and still says, I'm not going to keep Shabbos. So that's already takes down the numbers big. So for this applies only when he knows that it's forbidden. If he does not know, he probably is not considered an apostate. Okay. Number 62 is, if he refrains from doing it in the presence of a distinguished person, he does not fall into this category. The Eli Rabbah Mishnah Berurah says that if a person is machal, desecrates the Shabbos in public, but wouldn't do it in front of the rabbi, then he's Shabbos conscious a little bit. That's also he could join the Eruv. Here we're not talking about a person we're talking about if the person is even allowed to join the Eruv. Because if he can't join the Eruv, or she can't join the Eruv, then they have to join, like the Gentile unfortunately joins the Havdil, and to rent out the space. 63. Shulchan Aruch 385, Rashi Tosfos say that even if it's only rabbinic and it's publicly and it doesn't knows the laws of Shabbos and doesn't care if the rabbi sees him or her, see Tiferes Yisrael that even if he handles muktzah in public, even something that's muktzah, he is in that category of Machal Shabbos b'fer Hesya. And if he knows or she knows what they're doing, he cannot join the Eruv. See Bir Halacha, who rules that, excuse me, even those poskim who say that ordinary, he is not considered an apostate if he violates rabbinic prohibitions on Shabbos, agree that regarding the halacha, this halacha is considered one. Basically, the actual Hebrew is saying Yisrael Mumer Oishu Machal Shabbos V'Hesya. But what's the point? Someone who desecrates the Shabbos publicly is almost like, God forbid, an apostate. So therefore, you're not part of the Jewish people by desecrating the Shabbos and publicly on a halachic level. So even though maybe these things wouldn't apply to be considered a person Machal Shabbos that's strict if it's something of muktzah or something of rabbinic, but about joining the being part of the group, there's kind of a lot going on over here, which means there's a bit of an exclusion going on. Basically, they're excluding this person. So you can't be part of the Jewish community in the laws of Eruv. First of all, you're not keeping Shabbos. How can you be part of the Shabbos observance of the Eruv? But it's more than that. It's a little deeper, unfortunately. Where I say unfortunately, because unfortunately for the person to be in such a situation, where the person is being told you can't be part of the community because you don't care, you publicly don't care about Shabbos. Therefore, my point of why I'm saying this is because if a person doesn't know what Shabbos is and doesn't really understand, I'm not talking about a person who understands. That's why you have to be careful when we talk about in our shmooze and other things about telling people things, because if they're not going to listen, by telling them and they're not going to listen anyways, you're kind of bringing them into a level of disregard that is halachically problematic. And so therefore, the idea is not just because the person doesn't keep Shabbos, he or she doesn't keep Shabbos, that they're not part of the Eruv. They're not part of the community. And if you don't care so much about Judaism, that you're desecrating the Shabbos publicly, even though you know you shouldn't be, so then you can't be part of the community. And that's why a person who doesn't know the laws of Shabbos is, even though they're halachically transgressing the Shabbos, they're driving, they're doing all the things, they're lighting a fire on Shabbos, they're turning on their stove on Shabbos, but they don't really know what Shabbos is. So it's not that there's that if they understood properly what Shabbos is, they would say, of course I want to be part of the Jewish people. I don't want to be a person that cuts myself out of the Jewish people. So that's why we have to talk about this, even though it's uncomfortable, because this is not just a statement about Shabbos, but it's a statement about if you're part of the community of the Jewish people. Yes, Aaron.
I hear this all the time, that people who are religious, who say, I mean, some of my friends in the modern Orthodox community, they say the people who are like in Borough Park people, some of them, not all of them, we're just saying some, and they would say, like you just said, you can't be part of it. But like Chabad, let's use them as an example. They know if they pull someone in, no matter what their situation is, you don't know what their situation is. If they may know it and they got off the derrick, whatever. But you pull them in, then they want to know more. Why do you
That's
need
why
me?
that, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So we don't. That's why the footnote says it's the 61 saying slow down. We're not excluding anyone. To exclude someone is very extreme, because, like you said, if a person really understands what Shabbos is and really understands, not just know the meat, the bones of Shabbos, but actually understands with their lev, with their heart and mind, what it means to be part of the Jewish community, then slowly, eventually, we'll start taking the observance of Shabbos. So it's not something that it's not just something that we just cast right away. And that's why it's not, we don't just say you're not part of the community. It takes it takes a lot of effort to be a person who's excluded, God forbid. But the point is that if you reach the level, unfortunately, of being excluded, then you can't be part of the Erev. You're not part. It means you're not part of the people that are, by not keeping the Shabbos before Hestia. And even though that we say that even though you wouldn't be excluded from the Jewish people in other cases, but when it comes to the Erev and it's Shabbos and you know what you shouldn't be doing, even if it's rabbinic, you're still excluded from the Erev. So there's a combination of the spirit of Shabbos with your attitude about Judaism in general. Okay, I told you guys, I have to leave early. So I have to go to a doctor's appointment. So this is a good spot to stop. The next few laws until we finish the Perek are going to discuss the question that we've had, and Rebecca and I had, and we discussed about how do we do it in big spaces. Because he kind of touches on 24, 25, and 26 about the Eiruv, and then how do we do the Eiruv with the Eiruv Chatzeiros, the general Eiruv, the Eiruv Chatzeiros, but we have to remember the rule again, just to bring the illustration up over here, that this is now a little courtyard of 5, 6 houses, but take this and make this into Borough Park, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Seattle. This is a big city and there's a lot going on. So then you have to first make it into private domain, and then you have to make an Eiruv Chatzeiros in the private domain. So what we're basically going to be talking about is how do we create this big private domain, and then how do we do the Eiruv Chatzeiros with all the questions that we asked? Because now it's not just 5 people in it. There's a lot of people that could possibly not be Shomer Shabbos. Maybe there's even, God forbid, 1 or 2 people that are not Shomer Shabbos, knowing all the laws and meet all the criteria, unfortunately, to be considered a Mechal Shabbos B'Frehesia. And then you may have, of course, there's very few cities that have only Jews and only Jewish observers. And we have cities here in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, where they'll have Moshavim that are literally everyone keeps Shabbos, hopefully. But you have, or at least if they're not keeping Shabbos, it's private. They wouldn't do it in public in front of the rabbi. So there's all these different rules. But when the larger the Eruv becomes, which is this little space, the larger the issues become of the Gentile that has to be rented his space, sales that are happening throughout the year. Do you have to keep on making a new Eruv every day or every Friday? And do you have to do it 5 minutes before Shabbos? Because if you do an hour before Shabbos, maybe in that hour someone bought a house and now he's the new or she's the new owner, and that the Eruv that you did an hour ago doesn't help. So how do we do this on a mass level? That we're going to discuss going forward in the next few laws. All right, I want to wish everyone a good Shabbos, one of the laws of Shabbos. Thank you again, Barbara, for your sponsorship of the class of observance of Shabbos. It's helping us all be smarter and knowledgeable in the laws of Shabbos. Laila Tov, everyone, and take
Thank
care.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.